An anthology about the bad, the short lived, and the forgotten shows and events in television history. This is It Was a Thing on TV.
Punisher! Control!
Harry, before I change my mind!
I give you Super Train.
Episode 485, submission number 2236. The Dream Team versus Angola at the 1992 Summer Olympics. The Dream Team versus Angola in the 1992 Summer Olympics happened, surprisingly, in 1992. Well, more specifically, July 26th of 1992. Guys, we talked about the Olympic oddities last week, and specifically about oddities that happened in the opening ceremonies. And I think what we're going to cover tonight definitely is an oddity, just it didn't happen at the opening ceremonies. Maybe it's an oddity because of the end result. I think we all knew what was going to happen, that the United States would just dominate its opponent. But this is a different level of domination. Now, to get to 1992, we actually, believe it or not, have to go all the way back to 1904. In 1904, basketball was a demonstration sport. And also, if you don't know, basketball was invented only 13 years earlier in 1891 in Springfield, Massachusetts by James Naismith. So we're not going to really talk that much about the 1904 demonstration games. The next year that basketball appeared as an unofficial exhibition event was the 1924 Summer Olympics. So we're talking literally 100 years ago.
And do you know where that Olympics was in 1924, Mike?
I do believe it was Paris.
Yes.
Coincidental given where the Olympics are this year, Paris. But then basketball in 1936 became an official sport. Every Olympics, every 4 years, basketball has been played in some capacity. And the United States has an overwhelmingly successful record in basketball. They did end up with the silver medal in the 1972 Olympics on a very controversial ending against the USSR, where the last 3 seconds, believe it or not, was played 3 different times. And there were issues the first 2 times, and then the third time, the Russians scored and won the game, and the United States has actually protested that game now for 52 years. And because of the outcome, the United States' players and coaches and staff, everybody associated with the basketball team in 1972, they're sort of doing a protest of their own by never accepting the silver medal because they felt that was a little contrived, and the I don't want to say judges or referees necessarily, but there seemed to be some collusion going on to try and make sure that the Russian side ended up victorious. And, the whole Cold War was going on in 1972. So the silver medals that the United States earned, they're currently sitting in a vault, untouched for 52 years. Those medals are currently in a vault in Switzerland. So if you were a player or a coach on that team and you said, hey, I'd like my silver medal, you could do that, but there's a lot of unity in, hey, we got railroaded, and this is our way of saying middle finger right up to the Olympic Committee. Now, the United States did not play in the 1980 Olympics, so that's sort of irrelevant for our purposes. But then we get to 1988. And 1988, the United States did not do so well. They had won the gold medal every year except in 72, which I mentioned earlier, and 1980, since they weren't participating. That was the boycott because the games were in Moscow. In 1988, they ended up with the bronze medal, and the Soviet Union had won that year. It sort of came to light that some of the Russian players and some of the other players in Europe were actually professional players. The United States didn't necessarily take fondly of that because if you take a look at the 1988 U.S. basketball team roster, there were no professional players. Just going through the list really fast, key names: Mitch Richmond, who is a Hall of Famer. You had Percy Hawkins, decent enough player back in the day. You had Stacey Augmon, who, gosh, I think must have been only a freshman at this point because he didn't get drafted till 1991. So he was a young player back then. Then you had Danny Manning, who was the number one pick in 1988, played at Kansas, and David Robinson, who, even though he was drafted a year earlier, he had to fill a 2-year commitment with the Naval Academy. So even though he was drafted, he's not a pro yet because he's doing his military service. The references that I've been looking at suggest the whole Russians and Europeans are pros thing. But I believe that the United States rallied to get pro players to play because they got the bronze medal. They didn't get the gold for the first time without controversy.
My opinion's the only one that counts.
Okay, yeah, maybe the whole pro thing is legit, but I think the United States was just being a bunch of sourpusses by saying, hey, we won the gold every time we played except for the one time in 1972 where there was maybe some collusion going on, and we didn't win in 1980 because we didn't participate in 1980. So you know what? USA, USA, we've got to win, USA. So that takes us to 1992. You call it the Dream Team. We all call it the Dream Team. And when you look at the roster, to say the least, this is a dream team of players. Making up the Dream Team, let's go with the pros first. There was one
non-professional
in summer of 1992. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But we're going to talk about NBA players. First and foremost, Magic Johnson. He would have been in the league like 13 years at this point. He would have been maybe the old man on the team between him and Larry Bird. So we're talking somebody who's probably about 33, 34 at that time. Next is somebody that is beloved around these parts, Charles Barkley. At this point, he would have either just been traded to Phoenix or he would have been traded to Phoenix after the Olympics, because I believe he went from Philadelphia to Phoenix in 92 because he did win the NBA MVP in 1993.
Yeah, and that was the year the Suns went to the finals.
So Barkley was sort of on the move. Next is Chris Mullin. Maybe not the biggest name if you're not a diehard basketball fan, but he was a heck of a scorer for the Golden State Warriors, and he's a St. John's alum.
And let's not forget, he was college teammates with Mark Jackson, and you know what that means.
I don't know where this is going. I'm afraid to ask. Oh, are you going to talk about the 1991 Hoops card?
Yeah, with the Menendez brothers.
And funny you mentioned that. For some reason, that card is like really hot at the National Sports Collectors Convention, which is going on as we talk. That's part of the reason my voice is so raspy this week. I've been there the last 3 days, and not even joking, I got home maybe about 20 minutes before we started recording. I had been out of the house for over 12 hours today. Didn't have anything to eat, didn't have anything to drink outside of a little bit of water. Yeah, getting some food in my body and getting a little bit of beverages, it's helping a little bit, but I may not have a voice by Sunday. So next on the roster is John Stockton, the NBA's all-time assist leader. And actually, if I mention John Stockton, there's somebody who's highly associated with John Stockton, who is the next person we're going to mention, Karl Malone. And depending on what you know about Karl Malone, I may just say his name and move on because he did some very creepy stuff about 40 years ago. If he had to fill those needs, why didn't he just use a couch like J.D. Vance?
Who says we aren't topical here? It was a thing on TV. You know what? It's been 35 years, but I think George Newman was very ahead of its time with Town Talk.
George Newman. He starts where the others stop.
Sex with furniture. What do you think?
We're going to move on to Clyde Drexler. At this time, he would have been playing for the Portland Trailblazers. Probably the biggest name in Portland Trailblazers history. Maybe with all due respect to Bill Walton. Next, I think, is the person who saved the NBA. Because if you look at the NBA in the 70s and early 80s, it was like the third sport in America. It was behind baseball and football, and it wasn't really shown live all that often. Maybe sometimes on Saturdays and Sundays, but I think this man single-handedly saved the NBA. Michael Jeffrey Jordan. If I need to go into any greater depth about Michael Jordan's greatness, educate yourself. Go watch some old NBA films from 40 years ago, from 35 years ago, 30 years ago. Michael Jordan, like I said, single-handedly saved basketball. Maybe the greatest player to ever live, but that's up for debate. And again, speaking of like that Stockton-Malone sort of synergy we talked about, when you talk about Michael Jordan, there's one name that usually follows him, and that is Scottie Pippen. And he was on the Dream Team. Next, we mentioned this person earlier, Larry Bird, Boston Celtics legend, maybe the best shooter in NBA history. Many Lakers fans hate him. A little bit of a rivalry between the Celtics and the Lakers back in the 80s. Next is Patrick Ewing, NBA Hall of Famer. Spent most of his career with the Knicks. And I mentioned David Robinson earlier. He's the last pro on this list. Yes, David Robinson did play in the 1988 games in Seoul, but also he played in the 1992 games in Barcelona. Legendary Spurs player. As I said, graduate of the Naval Academy. Spent 2 years there before starting his NBA career, and I think he's got something like 4 titles, because he did win one, at least one, maybe 2 with Tim Duncan back in the late 90s / early 2000s. And I think he won at least 1, maybe 2 without Tim Duncan. So needless to say, really, really, really good player.
Actually, no, just 2.
He only won 2?
He only won 2.
I find that surprising.
He was retired by 03.
As I said earlier, David Robinson was drafted in 87, didn't start till 89, and so 03 would be a 14-year career when maybe it could have been 16 years. I thought he won a title without Duncan. I see here he won in 99, which I think was second year after Duncan arrived. And then he won again with Duncan in 03, where they also had Tony Parker in his second year and Manu Ginobili in what I believe was his third year. I can't believe he only won twice. But yeah, he did retire on top, I do believe. So those are our pros. We have 11 pros, and there's 12 total people on the Dream Team. So we're missing one person. What the committee did was they chose basically the best college player that year. Now, they had a number of choices. Your first overall pick in the NBA draft that year was Shaquille O'Neal. Great player, and we know he's a Hall of Famer, absolute legend. And he's basically the person that's carrying Lucky 13 now. No lies detected. The second overall pick was Alonzo Mourning. Again, Hall of Famer, legend in his own right. And actually, believe it or not, since I was talking about the National earlier, Alonzo Mourning was signing at the National today. I didn't buy him because I had money earmarked elsewhere, and I really needed to spend that $60 on that Greg Oden autograph. Hey, it's a beautiful card. I mean, seriously, if I showed it to you, it's a refractor and it just like beams. This is a beautiful card. Yeah, it's maybe worth not $60 to get autographed, but this is a beautiful card. And the thing is, if this wasn't Greg Oden, if this was a Kevin Durant, I wouldn't have gotten it signed because I think last time I checked, the version of this card for Kevin Durant was like a $5,000 card.
Ooh.
Makes you wonder what would have happened to Greg Oden if he stayed healthy, though.
Yeah. But also, the reason I think it's $5,000 is also because it's Kevin Durant in a Sonics uniform.
Regardless, it's a rookie card, and yeah, it's in a Sonics uniform. But still, Greg Oden, Kevin Durant, both highly rated 17 years ago. Greg Oden just had a lot of health issues, and Kevin Durant, maybe he hasn't had as many health issues, but by far he's had the better career. Oh, and also I did shake Greg Oden's hand today at the National. Good God, he has the biggest hands. I was talking with him just saying, hey, I remember when you were here 17 years ago at the National after he was drafted by Portland. Topps made him like a surprise guest. He just came out, waved to everybody. And I was maybe about like 10 feet away from him. So I told him that. I said, yeah, I've been waiting like 17 years to get this card signed because I was there like 10 feet away from you when you came to this surprise appearance at the National back in 2007. And we were talking about that, believe it or not. He didn't have a long autograph line, so I could talk to him for about a minute or two. But yeah, he's like, I remember that. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I was like 10, 15 feet away from you. So we had a nice little bonding moment there, and I got to shake his hand. But that doesn't have to do with the Dream Team. We do need to get to that last player, the collegiate player, and that was actually the third pick in the 1992 draft. Christian Laettner. Love him or hate him, he may have been deserving. I do believe he was the college player of the year that year. He was very versatile, hit clutch shots for Duke. Yes, his pro career wasn't as good as Shaq's or Alonzo Mourning's, but I think it's a fair pick. So there's your Dream Team. 11 NBA legends and Christian Laettner.
The guy who stomped on a Minu Timberlake during the 1992 regional final. Yes, I remember it well.
Who cares?
Greg, do you ever notice that Chico's a bitter little
Yes. Hey, when you root for the Boston Red Sox of college basketball, you have that little brother syndrome.
The Tar Heels have won more championships than the Boston Red Sox, my friend.
Whatever.
If anything, we're the New York Mets of the college basketball world.
What the
I was just saying, is that an upgrade? I don't know where you're going with that.
I was just wanting to get a rise out of Greg.
Okay.
I think you got a rise out of Greg by saying that UNC was the Boston Red Sox of the...
No, Greg's the one who said
it.
Okay, well, whatever. But anyhow, a few more names I want to add are the coaches for the Dream Team. The head coach was Chuck Daly. Legendary Detroit Pistons coach. Won the NBA title in 1989 with the Pistons. The Bad Boys. Can't forget the Bad Boys. Bill Laimbeer and Rick Mahorn. They were some bad mamma jammas back then.
And they repeated in 1990, let's not forget.
And then assistant coaches, there were three. And each of these three is, let's say, well-respected and popular in their own ways. First, I'm going to mention Lenny Wilkens. Hall of Fame point guard, number one, but also at this point, he would have been head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Because I think he went to Atlanta a year later, 2 years later, because that's when Fratello would have been head coach. But still, Lenny Wilkens, Hall of Fame coach, Hall of Fame point guard. Second coach, okay, Chico, just get your Duke rage ready because you haven't gone off enough on Christian Laettner. Second assistant coach is Mike Krzyzewski.
The bum!
I wish he would truly tell us how he feels, Greg.
Yeah. The bitterness.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for him to be like, Dean Smith should have been there.
I'm not saying Dean Smith shouldn't have been there, but I'm also not saying it.
Well, I think Mike Krzyzewski has quite the track record. Maybe not as good as Dean Smith in 1992. Well, definitely not, because Krzyzewski would have started coaching in 79, I believe, at Duke. And Dean Smith would have been sometime in the 60s. So not necessarily fair to compare a 13-year coach with a 30-year coach or 25-year coach. And then the last assistant coach, man, this is a name, and this could go a number of different ways. PJ Carlesimo.
Well, at the time, he was the coach of the Seton Hall Pirates, and he would have been 3 years removed from taking them to the Final Four in '89.
Absolutely. I remember that very well, where they lost to Michigan. But also at the same time, he would be 2 years away from leaving Seton Hall and making the jump to the pros, where he was a coach in Portland, Golden State, Seattle for its last year, Oklahoma City for its first year, and Brooklyn for a year.
But let's not forget the thing that PJ Carlesimo is best known for.
Well, I was going to hold on to that because, yeah, you may remember him as a good coach with Seton Hall or maybe with Portland, but please expound what happened that maybe our listeners really remember PJ Carlesimo.
Well, when he was the coach of the Golden State Warriors, well, you should say he was in a little incident with Latrell Sprewell where he, let's just say there was some gagging involved.
Latrell Sprewell choked him out for 15 seconds.
And it did indirectly lead to Latrell Sprewell going to the Knicks the next year.
But yeah, maybe the most famous thing Carlesimo is known for is being on the receiving end of a strangle from Latrell Sprewell. And man, think about it. If Latrell Sprewell didn't do that, maybe he's a Hall of Famer? I don't know. He was a very good player.
I mean, he was great with the Knicks. He was great with Minnesota. Yeah, it probably is holding him back, but I mean, his numbers say Hall of Famer.
He just didn't play long enough, to be honest. Because I didn't know he was out of the league by 2005. So that would have been, I think, a 13-year career. But yeah, 4-time NBA All-Star, All-Rookie second team, 16,000, almost 17,000 points, averaged 18.3 points per game. Maybe if he played another 2 or 3 years, if he somehow got to that 20,000 number, he'd be in the Hall of Fame, because I've done a little bit of research, and seemingly everybody in the NBA Hall of Fame is 20,000 points. There's like 1 or 2 exceptions to that rule. And one of them is a shame, and the other one I don't think is ever going to get in. Tom Chambers is one person. He deserves to be in. He was a really good player for the Clippers and the Suns and the Jazz back in the 80s and 90s. But the second person, and I say this with all due respect to Chico and Tar Heel Nation, Anton Jameson is not going to get the Hall of Fame. I'm sorry.
Well, you said it yourself. It's the Hall of Fame, not the Hall of Very Good.
Yeah, but like I said, everybody that has more than 20,000 points is in the Hall of Fame except those 2 people. And then there's a third one, Joe Johnson, who, again, is a fringe player. in terms of Hall of Fame. But I think we're sort of deviating. So that is your coaching staff and your roster of the Dream Team in 1992. So now the reason that we're here. As we said, July 26th of 1992, the Dream Team played their first game against the powerhouse basketball team from Angola? I'm not Angola. Oh,
Angola?
I didn't mean Angola. Angola. Angola?
Angola?
What are you doing? Listen to the United States, Angola. Angola. You know what I meant, but sometimes the wrong things come out. Hey, maybe that's going to be the basketball tournament on our network. It's going to be the Dream Team versus Angola. Oh my gosh. So the United States, excuse me. Oh my gosh. I need to take a breather after that. Angola. Oh, I do need a second, guys. I'm sorry. I really was not expecting that.
We're keeping all this, by the way.
Oh,
What?
this is all in.
You're not. Well, you don't do any of the damn editing, but you're not getting my coughing and stuff like that when I'm basically like choking on my own bile at this point. So, oh gosh, Angola. So I think the big indicator as to how much the United States dominated Angola is if you look at the score at the end of the first half. At halftime, and I usually like saying if a team is doubling up another team in basketball, that's a really safe lead. At the half, in this game, the United States wasn't doubling up Angola. They weren't tripling up Angola. They had quadruple the score of Angola. 64 for the United States and 16 for Angola. There should be like a mercy rule. That is just absolutely atrocious and almost humiliating. Yeah, putting up the Angola team against 11 of the best basketball players in the world plus Christian Laettner. In the second half of the game, maybe the Dream Team was a little more lenient to Angola. Yeah, you don't want to beat these poor Angolans by 95 points or anything like that. The United States outscored Angola 52-32. So when you add it all up, the final score was the United States 116 and Angola had 48. And if you look at the box score, everybody played some significant minutes, believe it or not. Taking a look, I see Clyde Drexler played the most minutes. The least was Christian Laettner, but he played 10 minutes. And Clyde Drexler, with the most time played, only played 23. So everybody got somewhere in the teens to 20s, minus Christian Laettner. I can hear Chico being all excited in the background. Ha ha ha, screw you, Dookie. In terms of leaders of the game for the Dream Team, Charles Barkley, he played 22 minutes, but he had 24 points on 10 for 13 shooting. Karl Malone scored 19 points in 19 minutes. And then you had Patrick Ewing scoring 11, and you had Chris Mullin scoring 11, and Michael Jordan scored 10, and Clyde Drexler scored 10. In terms of the rebound leaders, Charles Barkley had 6 rebounds, leading the Dream Team, and Patrick Ewing had 5. And for assists, you'd think John Stockton might have the most assists, but no, in this case, the most assists were by Magic Johnson with 10. And actually, taking a look here at the box score, I don't think John Stockton didn't play. Only 11 people played in the game, so maybe John Stockton was injured. And then Michael Jordan, this is an amazing number if you think about it. He had 8 steals. Scottie Pippen had 5. There were 30 steals by the American team. That's unheard of. 30 steals. And if we look at the Angola side, this isn't going to be good. I apologize if anybody here is an Angola fan. There are no names of note on this team. I will just tell you that for starters. Looking at it, being a pretty big basketball fan back in the 90s, none of these people made the NBA. So the leading scorers, two people tied for most points by Angola, were J.J. Conceição with 10 points and Paulo Macedo with 10 points. And speaking of J.J. Conceição, the J.J. stands for Jean-Jacques. He actually is a Hall of Fame player in FIBA, which is the international body for basketball. So they did have a Hall of Famer, if you will. But again, looking at the rest of these names, pretty much nobody's in terms of really famous people. And take a look at their stats. They shot 25% as a team, 17 for 68. In terms of three-point shooting, they didn't do too bad. 23.7%, which actually was a better percentage than the Dream Team in this game. The Dream Team was only 2 for 9, so that's 22%, 22.2%. And in terms of free throws, they went 5 for 13. I mean, those are actually like worse than Shaq numbers. In terms of rebounds, the aforementioned J.J. Conceição had 7. The rest of the team combined for 11. In terms of assists, if you want like bad stats, this is bad. J.J. Conceição had 2 assists. Anybody want to take a guess as to how many assists the rest of the team had?
1.
That is the correct answer. J.J. Conceição had 2 assists, and Angelo Victoriano had the other assist. So 3 assists.
Angela.
No, it's Angelo, not Angela. Angelo! And in terms of personal fouls, I mean, this is kind of atrocious. 10 people played, and there were 27 fouls against the United States. They tried getting the United States to the line, which, well, they did. Problem is the United States actually converted most of their free throws. 72%. 28 for 39. So after this, the Angolan team, it was the butt of jokes. I remember watching SportsCenter and news shows, and it was sort of embarrassing, to say the least, if you are a fan of Angolan basketball. The U.S. media, late night talk shows, stuff like that, they were ruthless, talking about just how the American team absolutely trounced the Angolan team. The Angolan team that year, believe it or not, they actually won 2 Olympic Games. Technically, they finished 10th. I mean, that's not bad. 10th out of 12 teams. Yeah, there's 2 worse. But after being humiliated by the United States, I'm surprised they actually won 2 games. So Angola, in the Group A bracket, the one that the United States was in, they won their 3rd game against Germany. Angola ended up being one of 4 teams not to qualify for the knockout stage. Basically, 1 loss and you're done. So they joined China, Venezuela, and Spain in that non-knockout competition, basically fighting for 9th place. Now, I cannot find who they beat in that consolation bracket, if you will. But again, it says they won 2 games, lost 5. And actually, believe it or not, in all of their games, they were only defeated by a total of 61 points. So if you look at what the Dream Team did to them, where the Dream Team won by 68, the rest of the tournament, they actually outscored their competition by 7 points. So maybe they weren't that bad of a team in retrospect.
Two final things worth noting about this game. First, believe it or not, the Dream Team did not call a single timeout in the entire game, which is unthinkable. But also, second, there was a bit of a height disparity between the two teams. The starting lineup for the United States, they averaged 6 feet 8 inches tall. The Angolan team, they averaged only 6 foot 3. That makes a huge difference, no pun intended.
So in the end, Angola, yes, it was a laughingstock, but really, they shouldn't have been a laughingstock. They actually had a halfway decent team. They just got blown out by maybe the greatest team ever assembled. And the Americans, they have had quite a bit of success on the basketball court over the last 32 years. They did win the gold, obviously, in 1992, but also 1996, 2000, 2008, 2012, 2016, and 2020. The only Olympic year they did not win gold was 2004 when they won the bronze. And this year, I don't know what to expect because, as we have seen, talking about me, Greg, and Chico, the United States has really played down to their competition. A week ago, as of the time we're recording this, the U.S. basketball team narrowly beat South Sudan by 1 point. The United States was what? Like a 44-point favorite in that game?
43.5.
Who's counting? 44, 43.5. Big difference. But still, the professionals, they said, hey, we'll spot South Sudan 43.5 points, and they lost by 1. And then a couple days after, the United States played Germany, and I was watching this. I haven't told this to Greg and Chico as I was watching it. The United States really sort of played down to their competition because it was really close until like the last 3 or 4 minutes. I think the United States ended up winning by like 7 or 6. But man, when you've got LeBron James out there and Jason Tatum and all these stars, you shouldn't be winning by just 6 points or 7 points. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Americans do this time around. And by the time you get this, we'll definitely know the results of a couple of games because the United States starts off playing Serbia on Sunday, July 28th. And then the United States is going to have the rematch of the century with South Sudan on the 31st. So you'll get this on August 1st. So you'll know how the United States has done in their first 2 games. Hopefully they're 2-0. Otherwise, maybe we're not going to be getting the gold medal. So hopefully the United States doesn't play down to their competition like they did the last 2 games.
And actually, an interesting little note about the South Sudan team. Everything the last 4 years has been paid for by former NBA player Luol Deng, also former Duke player. He paid for everything. Training, travel, food, jerseys, everything associated with the South Sudan basketball team was paid directly by him.
You'll have the results of the first 2 games when you get this episode on the 1st of August. But the third game that the United States is going to have will be against Puerto Rico on the 3rd of August. And then at that point, I think they take like the top 2 teams and they battle it out, not just in the group that the United States is in, which is Group C, but they play whoever is like one of the top 2 teams in Group A and Group B. And we somehow get a bracket for who's going to play for the medals. So that is the brief story about the Olympic Dream Team in 1992. 32 years ago, maybe America was overcompensating a little bit because of their lack of success in 1988. And Angola was the unfortunate victim to something that us three remember vividly as simply a thing on TV.
Now, guys, what if you wanted to relive the Dream Team beating Angola in video game form?
What?
Let's play eBay Prices Right, folks. So, guys, you are going to be bidding on a graded Team USA Basketball Limited Edition for Sega Genesis, graded WADA 9.4 copy. And you can tell it's vintage because it has EASN on it, not EA Sports. So let me read the description on eBay. Experience the thrill of basketball, the limited edition Team USA basketball game for Sega Genesis. This game, released in 1982, is a must-have for sports enthusiasts. Electronic Arts has made sure that the game is top-notch and provides a seamless gaming experience. The game is graded WADA 9.4 and is brand new, ensuring that you get the best quality gaming experience. With features like the ability to play as Team USA, this game is perfect for those who love sports games. Get your hands on this limited edition game and play it for hours on end. Well packaged, fast shipping, and insured. Well, the problem is, this game is encased, so you can't play the damn game. So, okay.
Give me a jackhammer and some spackle. I'll get this thing open.
No, you don't. No. You don't open it that way, Chico. Good heavens. What you do is you get, maybe not necessarily a chisel, but I've used paint scrapers in the past, and you just basically use that as like a chisel. Or you can get, I don't want to say like, not necessarily wire snips, but something to crack open that case, and then you can sort of extract it out of that. But the thing is, and Greg mentioned this, if you're buying this, you sure as heck are not playing with it. You are keeping it in that case to preserve the value. Go to your local used video game store and pick this up for $10 or whatever it is. Play that version. You don't want to play this game.
Now, I'm going to warn you. I'm going to have a minimum bid on this. The minimum bid is $250. So, Chico, you're going to start bidding.
I'm going to go 420, blaze it.
I got to go 450. I really think it's over 500, but I'm just going to play it safe and say 450.
$695.
Are
not
you
with my money.
me?
No. I'm not surprised, to be honest, because again, the grade is decent, 9.4. Looks like it's got the plastic wrapping on it, the factory seal. You don't buy this game to play it. You buy this game in hopes that this game never gets graded again or doesn't get graded above that 9.4. That just is another reason why I absolutely hate grading of most anything. I mean, I'll admit I've gotten sports cards graded, but I'm sorry, video games getting graded. Comic books, I understand. Yeah, video games is just absolutely ridiculous.
You know what my problem is? First of all, buying this as an investment, video games are meant to be played. It's right there in the title. Games. You don't buy it for the flex. You don't buy it for an investment. You buy it to play it.
I think my issue is a little bit deeper than that. If this was a popular game, any of the Sonic games, if it was like Altered Beast, I'm just thinking of really popular Sega games. Yeah, maybe you hold on to that and treat that as an investment. I just don't see people running out and saying, hey, I got to get this USA basketball game from 1992 that, honestly, I didn't even remember this being created. Yeah, I'm used to the EA games from like 93, 94, but I don't remember USA basketball.
Now, I should note, Ron Barr is in the game.
Well, he did a lot of the EA games back then. And also, remember, on Sports Byline USA, the radio show he hosted, he gave away EA Sports video games all the time back in the early to mid 90s. I spent many a night listening to that trivia part and calling in. I think he was in San Francisco, answering the question and winning like NHL 94. Oh, by the way, maybe the best sports video game ever, NHL 94. Don't come at me. That was such a great game.
And Sports Byline USA is known as the home of Wrestling Observer Live, which means that it is the home of Dave Meltzer giving reviews of all the Tokyo Dome matches that are 5 stars and above.
I love you worked in a Dave Meltzer reference there. That is like your forte. That's great.
You know what? I bet Dave would have given the basketball game like -2 stars.
Because it wasn't at the Tokyo Dome.
Yeah, if it was at the Tokyo Dome, it would have been at least 2.5 stars. He really didn't like the work rate of Scottie Pippen in that basketball game.
The 2020, in parentheses, 2021 Olympic Games were in Tokyo. How would Dave Meltzer have ranked that?
The basketball portion?
Yeah, the thing is, it wasn't in the Tokyo Dome, I don't believe.
No, it wasn't.
So how does that affect the rating? It was in Tokyo, but not in the Tokyo Dome.
Yeah, I have to wonder. Where was the basketball Tokyo played?
Basketball was played in Saitama Super Arena.
Okay, maybe they had some wrestling there. Maybe you would have given it at least like 3.5 stars or something.
That's something very interesting to ponder. Hey, speaking of something interesting to ponder, guys, it's time.
It's time. What's it time for, Mike?
Welcome to What Happened 40 Years Ago This Week on Santa Barbara. So, guys, we're done with Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour. I know it was a quick 39 weeks. So we need to fill this time somehow, and I'm filling it with Santa Barbara. What happened 40 years ago on the show that replaced Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour, Santa Barbara? Well, this is going to be the first installment, believe it or not, out of probably about 450 installments. Well, it ran until 1993, so yeah, 9 years, 50 weeks a year, 450 weeks. So yeah, this is going to be installment number 1 of 450. Buckle up, it's going to be a fun ride, kids. So this first week, 2 families are at the center of intrigue, love, hate, passion, and murder around the California clan in the premiere episode. Episode 2, Joe is welcomed by his mother, Marissa, and his sister, Jade. Joe's father, John Perkins, moves out in disgust. Santana Andrade reveals to her mother, Rosa, that she had Channing's child 5 years ago, but the baby boy was given away. What?
Episode 3.
Peter is taking Kelly home by boat when she spots her first and true love, Joe, who had just been released from prison. Episode 4. On the Capwell yacht with Peter, Kelly catches Joe spying on them from afar. A henchman plants a bomb in the Perkins home, but Marissa is not seriously injured. A mysterious stranger invites Joe for a meeting in an abandoned warehouse. And unfortunately, we don't have a plot line for episode 5. So there's your first week in Santa Barbara history. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to do this. I want to do this as a filler on this episode. I don't give a flying about Santa Barbara. I'm sorry if you do. Now I'm having like Match Game Hollywood Squares withdrawals. Guys, I'm going to start crying soon. We better just like end this.
And there's only one way we can end this.
You can check out our website at itwasathingontv.com, and you can find the 484 episodes that preceded this one. And of course, we got all sorts of great stuff there. Minisodes, live shows, extended versions. We got a bunch of stuff. We were at, I think, like 625 total files. Plenty of stuff up there. And then also, please don't forget, we're on Instagram, InstaThreads. That's the social media for our network, InstaThreads. Yeah, we're on Instagram and Threads and Mastodon at It Was the Thing on TV, except for Facebook. Please don't forget, you got to add the word podcast. It Was the Thing on TV podcast. If you want to find us on Mastodon, you got to do a search at It Was the Thing on TV at tvwatch.party. Also, remember, you can find us wherever podcasts are available, including Apple Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Audible, the Podbean app, independent podcast players. We're pretty easy to find. And please do not forget about YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to our channel. And please do not forget to hit that notification bell to be informed of all future uploads on the channel. And actually, before we talk about next week, we did just recently hit 500 subscribers on the YouTube channel. Thank you for listening to us there. Now, what's going to happen on the podcast next time? Well, we're going to talk about somebody we talked about, believe it or not, in this episode, but not in a sports playing capacity.
Wait, what?
We're going to talk about somebody we talked about in this episode, but we're not going to talk about them playing sports.
Wait, are we going to talk about Clyde Drexler when he was on Dancing with the Stars?
No, we're going to talk about Jean-Jacques Conceição and what he did on Angola television.
That'll be on a spin-off podcast come next year. It Was a Thing on Angolan television.
And the theme for that podcast is going to be all of us just going, Angola, Angola. And now you guys maybe really want to search Angolan TV.
Do you think Angola has any of those missing episodes of Doctor Who somewhere?
Would they have been converted to Portuguese? Because Angola would have been a Portuguese territory till 1975. And just taking a look at the channels in Angola right now, most of them are government of Angola channels. So, yeah, I'm guessing there may be a little bit of, let's say, propaganda. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm thinking that.
Maybe somebody in Angola like Patrick Trout. Who knows?
So we're not talking about the episode of Captain N with Larry Bird on it?
So, no, we're not going to talk about Clyde Drexler on Dancing with the Stars. We're not going to talk about Larry Bird on some cartoon. We're not going to talk about the best of Charles Barkley on Inside the NBA. We're going to talk about somebody else on that team and a little TV show that he hosted for literally like 2 months. You could say that next week's show is going to be magical, but you'll find out more about that next week right here on It Was a Thing on TV. As always, thank you very much for listening. We will catch you next Thursday with that episode.
Wow!
The U.S. 64 and Angola 16.